The council chamber stretched wide and tall, built to make visitors feel small. 12 seats rose in a semicircle, each one holding a representative from the oldest species in the galaxy. At the center of the floor, standing alone under bright lights, Ambassador Minho waited. He had stood in this exact spot 72 times before. Each time the conversation went the same way. The council complained about humanity. Humanity defended itself. Nothing changed. But today felt different. Today the air felt heavy with finality. Ambassador Minho of Earth, Counselor Velrith began. Her voice echoed through the chamber. She was Corvani, one of the first species to discover faster-than-light travel. Her people had been exploring space for 10,000 years. "We have shown great patience with your species." But that patience has limits. Minho said nothing. He had learned long ago that the council preferred to hear themselves talk. In the past 2 centuries, humanity has violated 17 council ordinances. Velrith continued. She touched a control panel, and holographic text appeared in the air. "You establish colonies in disputed territories without permission. You share advanced technology with species the council has deemed unready. You question decisions that have kept peace for millennia. You disrupt trade agreements. You challenge authority at every turn." Another counselor spoke up. This one was Vren, his silver skin reflecting the chamber lights. "Your military vessels patrol regions where they have no jurisdiction. Your merchants undercut established trade routes. Your scientists refuse to follow proper research protocols. Your behavior is unacceptable." Minho watched the accusations pile up like stones. He had heard them all before. What the council called violations, humanity called helping people. What they called disruption, humanity called innovation. The gap between their views had grown too wide to bridge. "We are not unreasonable," Velrith said, and Minho almost laughed. "We are prepared to allow humanity to remain in the galactic community, but only under new conditions." The terms appeared in the air, glowing in harsh white light. Minho read them slowly, though he had expected something like this. Probationary status for 500 years. Surrender of all military vessels. Economic sanctions on human worlds. Council overseers stationed on every human colony to monitor compliance. Restrictions on where humans could travel, what they could trade, who they could talk to. 500 years. That was longer than humanity had been in space. Longer than most human governments had existed. The council thought in terms of millennia. But humans measured their lives in decades. 500 years might as well be forever. "I need 24 hours to discuss this with Earth," Minho said quietly. Velrith nodded, clearly expecting this. "Granted. We reconvene tomorrow at this time. We expect your cooperation, Ambassador. The alternative would be unfortunate for everyone." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Comply or face consequences. Humanity was strong, but 12 ancient species working together could make life very difficult. Trade could be cut off. Technology could be restricted. Human worlds could find themselves isolated and struggling. Minho bowed slightly and left the chamber. Behind him, he heard the counselors already talking among themselves, confident that humanity would accept their terms. Everyone did eventually. The council had been making these demands for thousands of years. No one had ever refused. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of emergency meetings. Minho spoke with Earth's government, with colony leaders, with military commanders, with business executives, with ordinary citizens. The debate raged across every human world. Some argued for acceptance. 500 years was a long time, but it was better than war. Others argued for defiance. Better to fight than to live on their knees. But a third option emerged, quietly at first, then growing stronger. What if humanity simply left? The idea seemed crazy at first. Leave the galactic community? Abandon everything humans had built out here among the stars? But as people talked it through, it started making sense. Humanity had joined the galactic community hoping for friendship, cooperation, and shared growth. Instead, they had found bureaucracy, suspicion, and endless restrictions. The council didn't want partners. They wanted subjects, so why stay? When Minho returned to the council chamber, he carried with him the decision of 500 billion humans across 100 worlds. The counselors sat in their high seats, looking down at him with expressions ranging from bored to smug. They expected him to negotiate, to beg for better terms, to argue for mercy. Minho took his position in the center of the floor. He looked up at each counselor in turn, meeting their eyes. Then he spoke clearly and calmly. "Humanity has considered your terms. We decline. Silence filled the chamber. Belrith leaned forward, her expression confused. You decline? Ambassador, I don't think you understand the seriousness of— We decline, Minho repeated. Humanity formally withdraws from the Galactic Council. We will remove ourselves from all territories you consider disputed. We will return to our original borders. We will cease all activities that you find objectionable. We wish you well. The chamber exploded in noise. Councilors shouted questions, demands, threats. Minho waited patiently for them to quiet down. Finally, Velrith raised her hand for silence. No species has ever voluntarily left the Council, she said slowly. Is this a negotiating tactic? Are you trying to force better terms? No, Minho said simply. We're leaving. It's not a threat. It's not a bargaining position. It's a decision. We came to the stars hoping to be part of something greater, but this council doesn't want what we have to offer. You see our energy as chaos. You see our innovation as rule-breaking. You see our desire to help as interference. We're tired of being judged for being ourselves. You cannot simply leave, the Vren counselor sputtered. There are treaties, agreements, obligations, which we will honor during our withdrawal, Minho said. We will leave behind our facilities for others to use. We will complete any ongoing projects that affect other species. We will depart peacefully and completely. We estimate it will take 1 standard year to evacuate all humans from beyond our borders. After that, the Sol system and its immediate colonies will be closed to external contact. Velrith stared at him for a long moment. And if we refuse to let you leave? Minho smiled, but there was sadness in it. Are you really going to force people to stay who don't want to be here? Is that what the Great Galactic Council has become? A prison instead of a community? No one had an answer to that. We'll be gone within a year, Minho said. He bowed one last time, deeper than before, a gesture of true respect and goodbye. Thank you for the opportunity to know you. We're sorry it didn't work out. May you find the peace and prosperity you seek. He turned and walked out of the council chamber. Behind him, the councilors sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had just happened. In their thousands of years of existence, they had dealt with rebels, with warriors, with traitors and diplomats and conquerors. But they had never dealt with someone who simply walked away. Humanity was going home, and the galaxy would have to figure out what that meant. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the transport ship Horizon, watching the evacuation schedule scroll across her screen. 347 human settlements scattered across the galaxy. All of them needed to be emptied and abandoned within 12 months. It seemed impossible, but humanity had always been good at doing impossible things. Status report, she called out. Her first officer looked up from his console. The outer colonies are already packing. Most seem relieved, actually. They never felt welcome out here anyway. The closer settlements are moving slower. They have more to leave behind. Yuna understood. The frontier colonies were small, tough, used to hardship. They could pack up and leave in weeks. But the established settlements near council space had been there for decades. People had built lives there, started families, created homes. Leaving meant abandoning everything they had worked for. But orders were orders. Humanity was going home. The galaxy watched the evacuation with mixed feelings. Some species were amused. The upstart humans were finally learning their place. Some were suspicious. This had to be a trick, a strategy. Humans were too stubborn to just give up. But as weeks turned to months and the exodus continued, skepticism turned to confusion. Humanity wasn't bluffing. They were really leaving. Yuna's ship arrived at the Sanctuary Station, one of the largest human-built structures outside of Sol space. The station floated in neutral territory, a massive ring of metal and glass that held hospitals, research labs, and living quarters for thousands. Dr. Jiho had built this place from nothing, turning it into the best medical facility in 3 sectors. The doctor met Yuna at the docking bay, and he looked angry. You can't shut this place down, Jiho said before Yuna could even speak. We have patients from 40 different species here. Some of them are in critical condition. If we evacuate now, people will die. Yuna had expected this. Jiho was a good doctor, maybe the best she had ever met, but he cared too much sometimes. He saw patients, not politics. I have my orders, Yuna said quietly. All humans return to Sol space. No exceptions, damn your orders. Jiho's voice echoed through the docking bay. These people need help. We're the only ones who can give it to them. What happened to doing what's right? What's right is following the choice our people made, Yuna said, but her voice was gentler now. We voted to leave, Jiho, all of us. We're tired of being told we're wrong for helping people. We're tired of being punished for caring. If the council wants us gone, we'll go. But we can't stay just for this. Jiho looked down at his feet. He was tired too, Yuna could see. Tired of fighting the council's medical regulations. Tired of being told his treatments were too experimental, his methods too unorthodox, his compassion too excessive. The council had rules for everything, and helping people always took second place to following procedure. "Give me 3 months," Jiho said finally. 3 months to transfer my patients to other facilities and train replacement staff. That's all I ask. Yuna checked her schedule. It would be tight, but possible. Done, 3 months. But after that, we're gone. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Human teachers left their students. Human engineers abandoned their projects. Human merchants closed their businesses. In every case, they offered what they had built to others for free. No payment, no conditions, no strings attached. If the galaxy wanted them gone, they would go. But they wouldn't burn anything on the way out. The Vren Collective, one of the richest trading empires in the galaxy, sent a delegation to negotiate for human trade routes. They expected hard bargaining, high prices, maybe some grudges. Instead, the humans just gave them everything. Maps, contacts, business records, shipping schedules, all of it free. The lead Vren negotiator, a woman named Kess, stared at the data chips in confusion. "You're just giving this to us?" "No payment." The human merchant, a man named Seojin, shrugged. "We don't need it anymore. Maybe you can use it." "Good luck." Kess didn't understand. In her culture, information was currency. You never gave anything away for free. There had to be a catch, a hidden cost, some kind of trap. But the humans seemed genuine. They really were just leaving, taking nothing but what belonged to them, and offering the rest to anyone who wanted it. It didn't make sense. On the frontier, Lieutenant Doyen was overseeing the evacuation of the border stations. These were military installations, small but important, positioned to watch for raiders and pirates. The most dangerous group was called the Screeth, a loose collection of outlaws who attacked shipping lanes and weak colonies. Doyen noticed something strange. Screeth scouts kept appearing near the evacuation zones, watching but not attacking. His soldiers reported odd communications they had intercepted. The Screeth were asking questions. When would the humans be completely gone? How soon until the border was empty? How long until there were no more human patrols? Doyen didn't like the sound of that. He reported it to his superiors, but they told him not to worry about it. It wasn't humanity's problem anymore. Let the council deal with the Screeth. That was what they wanted, right? To handle things themselves without human interference. So Doyen kept his mouth shut and continued the evacuation. The months passed quickly. Human ships moved constantly, ferrying people and equipment back toward Sol space. They stripped their stations of everything portable but left the structures intact. Other species moved in almost immediately, claiming the prime real estate that humans were abandoning. A young Corvani couple took over a human apartment on a trading station. They were amazed by what they found. The space was bigger than they expected, well-designed, comfortable. The previous occupants had left cleaning supplies and a note that said, "Welcome to your new home. The water heater is tricky. We left instructions on the kitchen counter. Be happy here." The couple didn't understand why the humans would care about strangers moving into their old home, but they kept the note anyway. As the deadline approached, Ambassador Minho prepared one final message to the council. He recorded it from the last human embassy outside of Sol space, standing in an empty room with packed boxes stacked behind him. "This is our final communication from beyond our borders," Minho said to the camera. "As promised, we are leaving. We have left behind our stations, our facilities, our infrastructure. We have shared our data, our trade routes, our knowledge. We have done everything we said we would do." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We came to the stars hoping to be part of something greater than ourselves. We wanted to learn from older, wiser species. We wanted to share what we had and grow together. It didn't work out the way we hoped. That's okay. Sometimes things don't work out. We're not angry. We're just tired." Behind Minho, through the window, the last human transport ships were preparing to depart. "We ask only one thing. Respect our borders as we will respect yours. The Sol system and its nearby colonies are now closed to external contact. We're going home to figure out who we want to be without the Council's rules. Maybe someday we'll meet again under better circumstances. Until then, goodbye. May you find the peace we couldn't." The transmission ended. The last embassy closed. The final human ships left the docking bays. Within hours, there wasn't a single human outside of the Sol boundary. For the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was alone among the stars again. The council watched them go, still not quite believing it had happened. Velrith sat in her office reviewing reports of the evacuation. Everything had gone smoothly. No sabotage, no violence, no last-minute demands. The humans had simply left exactly as they said they would. It was anticlimactic, and somehow that made it worse. Well, Velrith said to her empty office, that's done. Back to normal. But as she looked at the star chart showing the new border around human space, a border that was now closed and sealed, she felt something she didn't expect. Unease. The galaxy had gotten what it wanted. The troublesome humans were gone. Everything could go back to the way it had been for thousands of years. So why did it feel like they had lost something important? 5 years passed faster than anyone expected. The galaxy settled into its new routine, and life went on much as it had before humanity arrived. The Council congratulated itself on handling the situation peacefully. The former human territories were redistributed among various species. Trade routes were reorganized. Everything seemed fine, but small problems kept appearing, little cracks in the smooth surface of galactic life. Dr. Hana had been one of the few humans who chose to stay behind. She had married a Corvani man and made a life on his homeworld, teaching at the university. When the evacuation happened, she faced a choice: go back to human space and leave her husband behind, or stay and become an outsider in a galaxy that didn't want her species anymore. She chose to stay. Love was more important than politics. Most days her decision felt right. But then there were days like today. Hana was teaching a class on xenobiology when alarms started blaring. A student had collapsed in the hallway. Chemical exposure, someone said. His skin was turning blue and he wasn't breathing properly. Hana ran to help. She knew what to do. The student needed an emergency injection of praxilene to counteract the chemical, and he needed it fast. Every second counted. She pulled out her communicator to call for medical help. The response came back immediately. We have logged your emergency request. A medical team will arrive within the standard response time of 35 minutes. Please keep the patient comfortable. 35 minutes. Hana stared at her communicator in disbelief. This student will be dead in 10 minutes. I need authorization to administer praxilene now. Medical procedures require authorization from the department head. Please wait for the medical team. Hana wanted to scream. She had the medicine in her office 3 doors down. She knew how to administer it. She could save this student's life right now, but procedure said she had to wait. She had to get authorization. She had to follow the rules. The student died 6 minutes later, lying on the floor while other students cried, and Hana held his hand. The medical team arrived 20 minutes after that, looked at the body and filed a report. The department head reviewed the case and found no fault with the response time. Everything had been done by procedure. 2 more students died the same way over the next month. Emergencies that could have been solved in minutes if someone was allowed to act immediately, but the system didn't work that way. The system required authorization, paperwork, proper channels. The system had worked this way for thousands of years. Hana remembered the medical station she had worked at before, back when humans still ran things in that sector. Emergencies meant action, not paperwork. If someone needed help, you helped them and filled out the forms later. It had seemed chaotic at the time, all that rushing around, all those decisions made in seconds. But people lived. She mentioned this to her department head, an old Corvani professor. He looked at her with sympathy. I understand your frustration, Dr. Hana, but rules exist for good reasons. We cannot allow individuals to make life or death decisions without oversight. That way lies chaos. That way lies students who don't die waiting for permission to be saved, Hana said, but quietly. She knew she couldn't change the system. She was just one person, and she wasn't even part of a council species anymore. Across the galaxy, Seojin was discovering similar problems. He had stayed behind to see if human merchants could still do business in the new environment. The answer was turning out to be no, but not for the reasons he expected. The problem wasn't discrimination or prejudice. The problem was that everything took forever. A simple trade dispute that humans used to resolve in a few days now took months. Both sides would file their complaints with the trade authority. The authority would review the case, which took weeks. Then they would schedule a hearing, which took more weeks. Then they would issue a ruling, which took even more weeks. By the time anything was resolved, the original dispute hardly mattered anymore. Seojun watched opportunities disappear while everyone followed procedure. Quick solutions, creative compromises, thinking outside the box, none of that was allowed. There was a proper way to do things and everyone had to follow it, no matter how long it took. He started to understand why humans had always frustrated the council. Humans wanted results. The council wanted process. Those two things didn't always mix. The most serious problems appeared on the frontier. The Skreath raiders, who had been quiet during the human evacuation, came roaring back with a vengeance. They hit a Corvani mining colony on the edge of council space, destroying the settlement and killing 5,000 people. The colony had sent out distress calls immediately, but the council response took 6 months to organize. They had to determine which species had jurisdiction in that sector. They had to approve a military deployment. They had to negotiate who would pay for the ships and soldiers. They had to follow procedure. By the time the council fleet arrived, the raiders were long gone. They found only ruins and bodies. Councillor Velrith reviewed the incident report with growing frustration. She remembered the last time the Skreath had attacked a colony. That had been 8 years ago, back when humans still patrolled the frontier. The human response time had been 6 hours. They had driven off the raiders and saved most of the colony. The council had filed a complaint about the unauthorized military action. Humans weren't supposed to patrol that sector. They had violated 3 different regulations by responding without permission. The council had spent weeks discussing the proper punishment. Now Velrith looked at 5,000 dead Corvani and wondered if the humans had been wrong, or if the council had been. Commander Hyunwoo of the Vren Defense Fleet faced his own crisis. An asteroid was on a collision course with a mining station. He had minutes to decide whether to evacuate the station or try to deflect the asteroid. Both options were risky. Both could go wrong. Hyunwoo froze. He needed authorization from command. He needed to follow the decision tree. He needed to file the proper reports and get approval for whatever action he took. But there wasn't time for all that. There was only time to act or not act. He tried to contact command. The response took 4 minutes. Stand by for authorization. We are reviewing the situation. 4 minutes became 8. 8 became 12. Hyunwoo watched the asteroid get closer, his hand hovering over the controls. He could give the evacuation order right now. He could save those people. But without authorization, he would be responsible if anything went wrong. His career would be over. He would be the commander who violated procedure. The authorization came 17 minutes later. Too late. The asteroid hit the station. 300 people died. The investigation cleared Hyunwoo of all wrongdoing. He had followed procedure perfectly. He had waited for authorization like he was supposed to. The delay wasn't his fault. It was nobody's fault. The system had worked exactly as designed, but 300 people were still dead. Reports like these kept crossing Velrith's desk. Crime rates were climbing across the galaxy. Medical response times had doubled. Technological innovation had slowed to a crawl. Trade disputes were piling up faster than they could be resolved. Frontier colonies were begging for better security, but the military deployment system couldn't move fast enough. Every report included the same strange phrase, like an echo. When the humans were here, this didn't happen. Velrith tried to dismiss it. These were growing pains, coincidence, adjustment period. The galaxy had functioned for thousands of years before humanity arrived. It would function fine without them. But late at night, alone in her office, Velrith found herself thinking about the humans. Their annoying questions, their constant rule-breaking, their frustrating insistence on moving fast and asking permission later. She had been so sure they were the problem. What if she had been wrong? She pulled up the historical records going back to when humanity first joined the galactic community. She looked at the trade data, the crime statistics, the medical reports, the technological advances. She looked at everything with fresh eyes, not as a critic, but as a scientist. What she saw shocked her. Every metric had improved when humans arrived. Trade increased. Crime decreased. Medical survival rates went up. New technologies appeared faster. Conflicts were resolved quicker. And it wasn't because humans were better at any one thing. It was because they were different. They moved fast. They questioned authority. They tried new solutions instead of following old procedures. They were messy and chaotic and frustrating. But they were effective, and now they were gone. And the galaxy was sliding back to the way things were before. Slow, safe, stagnant. Velrith sat in her office, surrounded by reports of problems that weren't being solved, and felt the weight of a terrible realization. The galaxy didn't have a human problem. The galaxy had a galaxy problem, and humanity for 2 brief centuries had been fixing it without anyone noticing, until they left. 10 years after humanity withdrew, the galaxy faced a crisis that made everything else look small. The Corvin Plague appeared from the outer rim, a disease that jumped between species and killed fast. Within weeks, it had spread to 6 different worlds. Within months, the death toll was in the millions. The Council assembled their best medical minds. They formed committees. They established protocols. They set up proper research procedures with oversight and approval processes. They followed every rule perfectly, and people kept dying. Dr. Hana watched the news feeds in horror. The plague had characteristics of 3 different disease families, and it was mutating rapidly. She had seen something similar years ago in research papers that human scientists had published, papers about adaptive pathogens and how to fight them. But those papers were in the human database, and the human database was behind the closed border now. She made a decision that could get her arrested. Late one night, she composed a message and sent it through the sealed human border. She didn't know if anyone would receive it. She didn't know if anyone would respond. But she had to try. "We need help, please." 3 days passed with no answer. Hana thought the message had been ignored or blocked. Then her personal terminal chimed with an incoming transmission. Encrypted, coded, untraceable. The message was from someone named Taeyang. "I remember you from the medical conferences. You always asked good questions. I'm not supposed to respond to this. We're not supposed to interfere with the galaxy anymore, but I'll send you our research on adaptive pathogens. What you do with it is your choice. Delete this message. If the Council finds out you contacted us, they'll call it treason." The data arrived minutes later. Years of human research, all of it focused on exactly the kind of pathogen that was killing millions. Hana stared at the information, her hands shaking. This could save so many lives. But using it meant admitting she had contacted humanity. It meant breaking Council law. It meant risking everything. She thought about the students who had died waiting for authorization. She thought about the millions dying from the plague. She thought about rules versus results. Then she called 3 colleagues she trusted. "I need your help." No questions asked. "Come to my lab now." They worked in secret using the human research as a foundation. They skipped the normal approval process. They didn't wait for committee meetings or proper authorization. They just worked fast and focused the way humans used to work. They developed a cure in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The official Council research teams had made almost no progress in 3 months. Hana's team tested the cure on volunteers. It worked. They produced it in larger batches and sent it to the plague zones. The death rate dropped immediately. Within 2 months, the plague was under control. Millions of lives were saved. The Council demanded an investigation. How had this cure been developed so quickly? What shortcuts had been taken? What procedures had been violated? They needed to know if the cure was safe, if proper protocols had been followed, if everything was done correctly. Hana stood before the investigative committee and lied. She said her team had made a breakthrough, got lucky, worked around the clock. She didn't mention the human data. She didn't mention Taeyang. She protected her source. The committee cleared her eventually, though they seemed suspicious. But lives had been saved, and that was hard to argue with. The cure became standard treatment, and the plague faded into history. But Counselor Velrith knew something was wrong with the official story. The breakthrough was too convenient, too fast, too much like the kind of solution humans used to create. She began her own quiet investigation. She didn't look for evidence of wrongdoing. She looked for patterns. She went through decades of records comparing the galaxy before humanity arrived, during their time here and after they left. She looked at every metric she could find. Response times, innovation rates, problem-solving approaches, medical advances, trade efficiency, military effectiveness, conflict resolution, everything. The patterns were impossible to ignore. Before humanity arrived, the galaxy had been stable but stagnant. Progress happened slowly. Problems took years to solve. New ideas were rare. Everyone followed the established procedures, and those procedures hadn't changed in centuries. Then humanity arrived, and everything accelerated. Not dramatically, not obviously, but steadily, consistently, measurably. Trade became more efficient because humans found creative solutions to old problems. Medical survival rates improved because humans were willing to try experimental treatments. Conflicts resolved faster because humans asked what works, instead of what's the rule. The Council had spent 2 centuries complaining about human violations, but every violation Velrith looked at had a similar pattern. Humans broke a rule, solved a problem, and made things better. Then the Council punished them for it. The unauthorized medical missions that saved billions of lives across developing worlds. Violation of the Non-Interference Directive. The creative trade solutions that prevented 3 major wars. Violation of established trade protocols. The rapid military responses that protected dozens of colonies. Violation of jurisdiction regulations. Every time humans broke the rules, they did it to help people. And it worked. Velrith found herself reading old complaints that the Council had filed about humanity. The complaints that had led to the ultimatum that had driven them away. She read them with new understanding. Humans establish colonies too quickly without proper authorization, translation. They expand and grow while we debate for years about whether expansion is appropriate. Humans share technology with species we deem unready. Translation. They help others advance while we keep them dependent on us. Humans question decisions that have kept peace for millennia. Translation. They ask if our old solutions still work instead of blindly accepting. Tradition. Humans disrupt established trade. Roots. Translation. They find better ways to do things and make us look inefficient. The humans hadn't been wrong. They had been right. And the galaxy had punished them for it. Velrith compiled everything into a massive report. Thousands of pages of data, analysis, and conclusions. She worked on it for months, checking and rechecking, making sure every fact was accurate. When she was done, she had proof of something that would shake the Council to its core. The galaxy was dying. Slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. Not from disease or war or catastrophe. It was dying from comfort, from complacency, from following the same old procedures that had worked well enough for thousands of years. The Council had become so focused on maintaining tradition that they had forgotten how to adapt. And humanity, in their brief time among the stars, had been the medicine the galaxy needed. They had brought change, energy, innovation, urgency. They had challenged the status quo not because they were rebels, but because they genuinely believed things could be better. The galaxy had called them troublemakers, had called them rule breakers, had called them a problem that needed to be solved. And when humanity finally had enough and walked away, the galaxy lost the one thing that had been keeping it alive. Velrith sat in her office, looking at her completed report. She thought about all the times she had voted to restrict humanity, all the times she had sided with tradition over innovation, all the times she had chosen procedure over results. She had been so certain she was right, she had been wrong, catastrophically wrong, and now she had to convince the rest of the Council that they had been wrong too. That was going to be hard. Admitting mistakes always was, especially for a Council that had been making decisions for thousands of years. They would resist. They would deny. They would defend their choices, but Velrith had the data. She had the proof. And she had something else too. She had a growing fear that if things continued as they were, the Great Galactic Council would eventually become irrelevant, not destroyed or conquered, but simply passed by, left behind by a universe that kept moving while they stood still. Humanity had walked away because they were tired of being held back. How long before other species made the same choice? How long before the Council was left with nothing but empty rules and ancient procedures, presiding over a galaxy that no longer cared what they thought? Velrith made her decision. She would present her findings to the full Council. She would show them the truth, whether they wanted to see it or not. She would make them understand what they had lost when humanity left. And then, if they were smart, they would do something they had never done before. They would admit they were wrong. They would ask for help. They would change. If they were smart, Velrith hoped they were smart. Because if they weren't, she was looking at the slow death of everything the Council claimed to protect. Councillor Velrith stood before the full Galactic Council and presented her findings. The chamber was silent as she showed them graph after graph, statistic after statistic, pattern after pattern. By the time she finished, several counselors looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry, but none of them could dispute the data. "We made a mistake," Velrith said simply. "We treated humanity as a problem when they were actually a solution. We saw their energy as chaos when it was actually adaptation. We punished them for breaking rules when we should have been asking why those rules needed to be broken. And when they finally left, we lost something we didn't know we needed." The debate lasted for weeks. Some counselors accepted Velrith's conclusions immediately. Others fought against them, defending the decisions they had made, the traditions they had upheld. But slowly, as more problems piled up across the galaxy, even the holdouts began to see the truth. The galaxy was struggling, and it would keep struggling unless something changed. The council voted, and the decision was close but clear. They would approach humanity. They would admit their mistake. They would ask for another chance. Velrith volunteered to be the one to make contact. She traveled to the border of human space, to the empty zone where no ships had crossed in 10 years. She sent a message requesting an audience with human leadership. Then she waited. The first response came a week later. Request denied. She sent another message. Denied again. And again. 7 times she asked. 7 times she was refused. She understood why. Humanity had been rejected, judged, and driven away. Why should they care what the council wanted now? On the 8th attempt, she tried a different approach. She didn't request a meeting. She just sent her report. All of it. Every page, every graph, every conclusion. She sent it with a simple message. "This is what we lost when you left. We were wrong. I was wrong. You deserved better." The response came 3 days later. Ambassador Minho, now much older, appeared on her screen. His hair was gray and his face showed the years, but his eyes were still sharp. "Counselor Velrith," he said, "I've read your report." "Why send this to me?" "Because you deserve to know," Velrith said. "Because you left thinking you weren't wanted, and I need you to understand that was our failure, not yours. You were exactly what the galaxy needed. We were too blind to see it." Minho was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want from us?" "A conversation," Velrith said. "That's all. Just talk with us. Let us understand how you stayed innovative, how you made quick decisions without losing sight of what mattered, how you balanced rules with judgment. We've been spacefaring for thousands of years, but you remembered something we forgot. We want to learn." "You want us to come back and fix your problems," Minho said, and there was an edge to his voice. "No," Velrith said firmly. "We want to learn. We want to understand. We want to become better versions of ourselves. Not because you force us to, but because you inspire us to. But I'll be honest with you. If you say no, if you never open your borders again, I'll understand why. We earned that rejection." Minho ended the call without answering. Velrith waited, not knowing if she would ever hear from humanity again. Behind the closed border, the message sparked intense debate among human worlds. Admiral Yuna, who had overseen the evacuation 10 years ago, argued against reopening contact. "They made their choice. We made ours. We're thriving here. Why go back to being judged and criticized?" Dr. Jiho, who had reluctantly abandoned his medical station, saw it differently. "There are still people out there who need help. We have the knowledge and skills to make a difference. Isn't that worth something?" General Doyen, remembering the frontier colonies that had been raided after humans left, was conflicted. "We could save lives, but at what cost to ourselves?" The debate raged across every human world, in every forum, in every home. The question was simple but profound. What did humanity owe to a galaxy that had rejected them? Ambassador Minho listened to all the arguments. Then he made a decision, the same way he had made the decision to leave 10 years ago. He spoke for Earth, but he spoke with the voice of billions who had voted, discussed, and chosen together. His response to Velrith was public, broadcast to the entire galaxy. "We will send teachers, not fixers. We will share knowledge, not take responsibility for your choices. We will open diplomatic channels, but we will not rejoin the Council under the old terms. If you want humanity back, the Council itself must change." He paused, letting that sink in. "We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for a council where questions are valued, where innovation is encouraged, where helping people matters more than following procedure. We're asking for a galaxy where being different is seen as strength, not weakness. If you can build that, we'll be part of it. If you can't, we'll wish you well from behind our borders." The council faced a choice. Accept humanity's terms and reform themselves, or refuse and continue as they were. The debate was fierce. Change was hard, especially for species that had done things the same way for millennia, but the problems kept piling up. The plague, the raids, the slow decline. The evidence was impossible to ignore. They voted to reform. Not unanimously, not easily, but they voted. The changes came slowly at first. The council established rapid response teams that could act without waiting for full approval. They created innovation councils that welcomed new ideas instead of automatically rejecting them. They reformed their medical protocols to allow emergency action. They adjusted military procedures to enable faster deployment. They encouraged questioning authority as a feature of good governance, not a bug to be eliminated. It was messy. It was uncomfortable. Some species struggled with the changes more than others, but gradually things began to improve. Response times decreased. Innovation increased. Problems got solved faster. The galaxy started growing again instead of stagnating. 15 years after humanity walked away, they returned, not as subordinates or probationary members, but as equals. The border opened and human ships began traveling through galactic space again. The reunion was awkward at first. Too much hurt on both sides. Too many memories of rejection and frustration. But slowly relationships rebuilt. Human teachers worked with council species to share their approaches to problem solving. Council scientists collaborated with human researchers on new projects. Trade resumed, stronger than before. Dr. Hannah cried when the first human medical ship arrived at her university. She hadn't realized how much she missed her own people until she saw them again. They brought new techniques, new ideas, new energy. The university hospital became one of the best in the sector, combining the stability of Corvani tradition with the innovation of human creativity. Seo Jun reopened his trading business, finding that the reformed trade dispute system actually worked now. Problems still took time to resolve, but not months, days or weeks, not years. It was a compromise between human speed and council thoroughness, and it worked better than either extreme. The frontier became safer as human patrols resumed, working alongside council forces. The Screeth Raiders found themselves facing a coordinated response that came fast enough to actually catch them. Piracy decreased sharply. In the council chambers, a new seat was installed for humanity. A plaque was mounted on it. To humanity, who taught us that tradition must serve the living, not the dead. Ambassador Minho's daughter, Nari, took her father's place as the human representative. She was young, energetic, full of the same questioning spirit that had frustrated the council 15 years ago. But now, when she asked, "Why do we do it this way?" the other councilors didn't dismiss her. They actually thought about their answers. Nari's first speech to the council was simple and direct. "My father told me about the old days, how humanity was always told we were doing things wrong, how we were judged for being ourselves, how we finally left because we were tired of fighting for the right to help people. I'm glad those days are over. I'm glad we can be partners now instead of problems. So let's get to work. There's a lot to do." The council chamber, which had been silent and stern when Minho first walked away, now buzzed with energy. Discussions were livelier. Debates were more intense. Questions were welcomed instead of discouraged. It wasn't perfect. The old species still sometimes fell back into their comfortable traditions. The humans still sometimes moved too fast and broke procedures. But they were learning from each other. Counselor Velrith, now very old, watched Nari take her seat with a feeling of satisfaction mixed with regret. She wished she had understood 15 years ago what she knew now. She wished she had listened when Minho first raised his concerns. She wished she had valued humanity's differences instead of seeing them as problems. But at least she had learned. At least the galaxy had learned. Sometimes you had to lose something precious before you understood its value. Sometimes you had to make mistakes before you could make things right. Sometimes you had to watch someone walk away before you realized you needed them to stay. The galaxy was better now than it had been in centuries. Not because humanity had fixed it, but because humanity had inspired it to fix itself. They had shown the council that change was possible, that innovation was valuable, that questioning traditions could make them stronger instead of weaker.